and I call the member for Hinkler.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm very pleased to rise to speak on the Defence Legislation Amendment Naval Nuclear Propulsion Bill 2023. And of course the Coalition will be supporting this bill. After all, the AUKUS arrangement is a coalition arrangement. It's an agreement that we struck when in government. It is the right decision. And I'm very pleased to see that the federal Labor government continues to support what is an absolutely essential addition to our defence capability. And as the Minister for Defence said in the second reading speech, Australia will now become one of only 7 nations to operate nuclear-powered submarines in the world. Just 7. And yet we see that there's more than 32 that utilise this technology to deliver baseload electricity in their countries. And some 50 are exploring or already investing in that same technology for the same purpose. But more on that as we continue through this speech. So what is it that we need to deliver these systems, these submarines, this defence capability in our country? Well, as the Minister said, we need to develop the full suite of skills, facilities and institutions along with the appropriate regulatory and legislative architecture to be nuclear stewards. Now, we have been nuclear stewards for decades. The Lucas Heights reactor is a critical part of what this country does, particularly in the production of nuclear medicine isotopes. In fact, some 12,000 to 14,000 every single week are produced and utilised in this country for the purpose of saving people's lives, for PET scanners, to identify cancers, for treatment. Now, that use produces waste. That waste has to be dealt with, and as we all know, under non-proliferation and other treaties around how each individual nation deals with the waste from reactors, we have to deal with that ourselves, and we have done. In fact, the good people of Kimber, in the majority, have accepted a facility to deal with that low-level radioactive waste in South Australia, and it's the right decision in the right location in the right community, and it needs to be done, and I'm very pleased that it is continuing, even though I believe it's back before the courts again, which is a great shame. This bill lifts the moratorium around civil nuclear power because we are building these in Adelaide. And guess what, Madam Deputy Speaker? If you're going to build a reactor, whether it's in a submarine or otherwise, you need to avoid the existing moratoriums in this country. But it's only for these. It's only for these. It's not for anything else. Apparently it's only for a submarine because we are going to build nuclear capacity. We are going to build a nuclear submarine. We're going to build a nuclear industry. We are going to have a domestic nuclear industry in this country because there is no other outcome. If we are going to build submarines with reactors, then we will have civilians who are trained specialists, whether they are physicists or engineers or others, who will be assisting defence, and they will be based in this country, and we will build that capacity. Any other idea is just blatantly wrong. The idea that nothing else will happen apart from this, well, the government themselves have said there will be some 10,000 people required for building this capacity all around nuclear technology, all around an industry which is already well established around the world. It is incredibly safe, incredibly safe. There are so very few incidents in nuclear reactors. It is just astounding. When you compare it to other risk environments, it is very low. As I've said, this is the right decision. So, if we look at what we need for the nuclear industry, we need to build nuclear capability, we have to lift the moratorium, we have to make sure we have the right people, we have to use the right technology, which of course comes as part of the AUKUS arrangements with the United States and England. These are advanced reactors. And to give those who might be listening to this broadcast some context, and I'm told, and this is not top secret, I'm told it's allowed and it's in the public arena already, that the reactor in a Virginia-class submarine, for example, is around the size of a 44-gallon drum. To give people some context, if they're watching on the video, that's roughly the height of one of the chairs in the Federation Chamber. It's about the same width. It's a circular drum. That's not very big, but it powers the entire submarine, and it makes it comfortable for submariners. And it runs for 30 years before it needs to be replaced. And guess what? It will produce high-level radioactive waste, which has to be dealt with by this country, in this country, by the government of the day. So we have an industry which is building civilian and technical and military capability and capacity. We are building reactors in Adelaide. We are dealing with high-level radioactive waste. We will utilise these facilities for many years. They will run for 30 years. Now, a power station will run for 80 years. In fact, it could run much, much longer if it's reconditioned and set again. So the idea that we can do this in Australia, but we can't develop nuclear capacity to deliver electricity, baseload power, that will run for 80 years with the same people. I mean, the shadow of hypocrisy follows federal Labor around and around and around. And if we look at what's happened in recent years, like, I'm very pleased that Labor has changed their mind. Genuinely I am, because this is the right decision for our nation and for our future. But when the Coalition said, the Energy Minister at the time, Minister Taylor, in 2019 said the Coalition has an open mind, the Labor Party went ballistic. I mean, we saw, Madam Deputy Speaker, even the current Treasurer now in the state of Queensland, Minister Dick, how good is Queensland? Beautiful one day, radioactive the next. This is the type of reaction that is typical for Labor. Where is it going to be? Rabina, the Wide Bay, even the now Prime Minister Albanese in 2019, if these people are serious, they should be upfront with every single Australian about where they think these power plants should go. Beautiful one day, nuclear the next, said the now Prime Minister in 2019. Well, guess what? We are going to have nuclear-powered submarines, and they will be in Adelaide and Brisbane and Sydney and Perth and Darwin. They will be around the country. The hypocrisy of Labor to say that you can't utilise it for the benefit of all Australians is just ridiculous. And at the same time, Madam Deputy Speaker, that Minister Dick was making these sorts of silly comments, Simpsons-like comments, guess what? There was a ship called the USS Ronald Reagan parked at Brisbane Port, and it's got more than one nuclear reactor. It's got multiple nuclear reactors, and it was about 10k from where Minister Dick was making these comments. If you want politics to be a circus, keep sending the clowns, that's what I say. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is an opportunity here that Australia desperately needs. I mean, the points have been made by the member for Petrie. If the federal Labor government seriously thinks they will build 28,000 kilometres of transmission in this country, with all of the easements that's required, with all of the things that will go to court, with all of the native title and environmental approvals by 2030, you are kidding yourselves. It will not happen. It simply will not happen. So the power generation that could potentially be utilised from nuclear is established around the world. Technology continues to advance, whether it's small modular reactors or others, because that's what this is. It is a small modular reactor that fits in a very sophisticated tin can that will go 200 metres under the surface, for example, full of Australian submariners, defending our nation, running for 30 years without being refuelled. But you can't put one on a block of concrete in one of the most stable countries in the world to use it to generate electricity. That's just farcical, absolutely farcical. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has stated unequivocally that we support the nuclear industry in this country, that we support AUKUS, that we support the building of these submarines, the utilisation for our nation and in our interests, because it is the right decision. But the idea that you won't utilise the same technology and the same group of people and the same issue across the country to generate electricity, because this is how simple it is, Madam Deputy Speaker. A nuclear reactor boils water to create steam. That steam runs a turbine. That turbine turns a generator, create electricity. Exactly the same as whether it was coal-fired power, whether you run it on chook manure, you stick in wood, whatever. You are simply boiling water to generate electricity in a traditional generator. And the big advantages of those generators compared to what's proposed by federal Labor is they have inherent characteristics which you have to pay for in intermittent wind and solar. They have system strength. That is incredibly important to maintaining the network and its stability. They are in one place, so you can hook them up with big transmission lines and distribute it through transmission and out to people's houses. And if you add that on to what Labor is proposing around electric vehicles, for example, even AEMO has said you could need a 60% increase in generation capacity, transmission and distribution. So if you think about your house, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not picking on you, it's everybody's house, you have to upgrade every single supply point from your switchboard, well, even into your garage for the fast charge generator, all the way back to the substation and upgrade that, and all the way back to the generator and upgrade that. It is an enormous undertaking. It will cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Or you can build a baseload power station using technology that federal Labor now has to deliver and has committed to. It is no different. It's exactly the same. It can be done. The only thing that needs to be determined is where do you put them? Where do you put them? And in my view, and this is just my view, it has to go to a community that supports it. And do I think there are communities out there that want a $10 billion facility and potentially get free electricity for everyone that lives inside of that nuclear reactor and power generation plant and a high-paying job? Absolutely I do. They will be out there and they will be available and they'll want to use it. And if you look at existing coal-fired power stations, as they come to the end of their natural life, because that's what happens with equipment if you don't maintain it and replace it, that's just nature, they already have enormous storages of water for their ash systems. They already have connections for transmission. They have existing easements. They already have existing approvals. They are brownfield sites. Now, clearly there'll need to be assessments about whether they are earthquake-prone or any other risk. But those risks can be assessed, those locations can be identified, and there are communities that would welcome these types of investments with open arms. And I can tell you now, the ones that don't have open arms are the people of regional Australia who are being told that literally millions of hectares of the land that they utilise, particularly to generate food, will be covered with solar panels that last 20 years, assuming they don't get hit by a cyclone, they don't get hit by hail, and if you think that's unlikely, well, there's a facility at Gympie in the member for Wide Bay's electorate, wasn't even connected. One hailstorm lost 20% of the facility, 100,000 panels destroyed before they even got put on. So that brings me to waste, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we've already outlined, federal Labor has to deliver a high-level radioactive waste facility because it is a necessity for these submarines when they come to end of life that it has to be dealt with. It's that simple. So for all those people in Australia who think this isn't going to happen, it has to, because the decision is made. Australia is getting a nuclear industry. It is very, very straightforward. But if you look at the United States, and this is on the United States Department of Energy's website from memory, they provide electricity from nuclear facilities to around 70 million people, around 70 million. And each year, to power 70 million people, those facilities, and keep in mind this is older technology that's been in place for some decades, delivers approximately half an Olympic-sized swimming pool of waste. Half an Olympic-sized swimming pool of waste. Because it is so dense. There is so little of it to produce so much energy. By comparison, and this is from the Parliamentary Library, if we look at wind turbines, the estimate is by 2050 there will be 43 million tonnes of wind turbine blade waste alone, just in turbine blades. 43 million tonne that can't be recycled, that's made of a composite, that is a carbon fibre composite and combined with a pile of other things, stuck on very high towers that has to be dealt with. It costs a fortune, 43 million tonne. Or you can utilise technology that this nation has to have as part of this arrangement for things that have to be put in place because they are necessary to have nuclear-powered submarines run by Australia defending our country. Every single stage of the cycle will now be addressed because they must be. They must be as part of this agreement. There are no other options. And the comparison is endless. Rough and ready, every single wind turbine needs about 50 acres of footprint, 600 tonnes of concrete in the base. And they're still intermittent, and you still have to build another system, an entire system which backs it up 100% because a wind turbine runs roughly 33% of the time, and a solar panel's utilisation is like 22%. So the idea that we'll cover this country in a tarpaulin with something which is intermittent, that we will rely on the weather for the security of our country, for our businesses, for our homes, for the things that we need at a time when we need this country to be strong, is the wrong decision. It is the wrong decision. So 2050 is a long way away, a very long way away. We need to make sure we are keeping manufacturing in this country, not having it leave and go international because they simply can't afford to be here. If they are not internationally competitive, they are not competitive. If they don't have affordable gas and they don't have affordable electricity and they don't have an available workforce and they can't utilise those things in this country, they will leave. It is that simple. So I'll go back to where I started, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Coalition supports this legislation. The Coalition supports the AUKUS agreement. It's the one that we struck. It is the right decision for our nation. It is the right decision for our national security. But the idea that we won't use this technology for the benefit of all Australians is the wrong decision. It is the wrong decision. So I think the hypocrisy that we see from people like Minister Dick and what the former Prime Minister said, well, the South Australian Premier, I reckon he had it right. He got his fingers slapped, but he had it right. We should be utilising this for all Australians. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.